how are you? Welcome on in.
Podcast by George.
Another podcast by George.
Podcast by George. Border to border, coast to coast. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. Well, you know, I like doing the news. That was my training. That was my career when I was doing it back in the day. I liked it a lot. I like doing these live streams, but man, I hate doing episodes and stories like this. Past couple of days, I've been reminded of. I'm thinking of this situation that I covered back in the day. It was a real cold winter's night. Sub-zero, and some guy had a wood-burning stove in his house. He worked at Firestone, the big rubber-making manufacturer, and he worked like third shift overnight. Well, he was at work at Firestone, and something went wrong with that wood-burning stove, and it burned down the house and his entire family, and I was there on the sidewalk covering that when he rolled up. And man, I will never forget that as long as I live. The man went into shock right in front of me, went down on the sidewalk. And I mean, that's kind of what I've been feeling like here the past couple of days. And it's because of the situation in Nashville. I mean, we got to do it. We got to talk about it. There is some news, there's some angles, some interesting things to do with this. So I want to bring it in. I want to bring on a guy that I love having on the show. But I told him when he was in the green room here before we came on that I almost wished that I'd never see or hear from him again if it meant that some of this could be mitigated, resolved somehow. Folks, our guest on the podcast by George Live Line today is Joe Gorton. He's a professor emeritus of criminology at the University of Northern Iowa. Joe has worked tirelessly to stop this national disgrace, this shame of gun violence in America. And he's got a standing offer out there to anyone who wants to debate him on this issue that he spent most of his life on. I mean, he is my guy on this. He is the expert. And like I said, I would almost wish that I never talked to him again. But let's bring him on and say hello, hi, how are you? And good morning to the great Joe Gorton. Hi, Joe.
Oh, good morning, George. And thank you so much for having me on. And, you know, I just wish that more people in the media would model your commitment to helping people stay informed and become more well-informed about gun violence, the precursors to gun violence, and most importantly, what we can do about it. Because, you know, I think this is a really crucial part of it. And frankly, the American media is letting us down on it. So not all. I mean, we have some, but in the print media. But
yeah.
So just, you know, I just really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Again, thanks for coming on. Let's start here because I want to start here. I might end here too. I want to bring this up on screen. We're talking about Nashville, folks, today. Let me bring this up. These are the victims. And Joe, I gotta watch it because I could start to cry on this show. Honest to God, I mean, the older I get, the more weepy I get. Honest to God, I can't hardly stand to look at this. As a matter of fact, with some of these stories, I know about this. I know how. We got to look. That's what we got to look closely, folks. This is Everly Dickhouse. She tried to pull a fire alarm to alert others as the mass shooting was underway, according to her family. There's the picture. Look closely, folks. Look at this boy. That's William Kinney. With a Valentine there from his family. He's dead. He's gone forever. This is Holly Scruggs. She's the pastor's daughter. And this is a family photo of Holly gone forever. This is Dr. Catherine Kuntz, gone forever. She ran towards the shooter, tried to intercede on the behalf of her students. She was beloved in the school. She'd do anything for these kids. She did everything. She's gone. Here's a substitute teacher. This is Cynthia, folks. Another person gone. I mean, lost. I mean, my God. This is custodian Mike Hill. He worked at the Covenant School for more than a decade. And my God, I love this photo. I mean, this is the that's cleaning up literally after our kids. The ultimate sacrifice here, the ultimate victim, Mike Hill, gone forever. We need to look at these photos. We need to think about this. I want to put this up on screen. And boy, this one I'm not going to leave up very long. Joe, I know that you've seen this. This is on social media everywhere, and it reminds me of the running girl in Vietnam. Do people remember that photo of the girl running from the napalming in Vietnam? People didn't want to look at that either. It was banned. It wasn't even put on. It was put on the news wires, but some media outlets wouldn't even cover that back in the day. But it had a lot to do with waking people up to the horrors of war on civilians and napalm. And here's this graphic. Somebody photoshopped this, put this thing together. My God. That's America, folks. That's what we've got to try to do something about. And that's why I've got the great Joe Gorton on the show. Joe, I mean, when you see those images, give us your thoughts.
Well, I think that particular image is especially evocative and right on point, because what we're doing is we're sacrificing children on the altar of American guns and the Second Amendment and large corporate profits on behalf of gun ownership. And as I say to people everywhere I go, and I've posted this picture on my website and so many others of children, the first thing I talk about when people ask me about gun violence is and they don't know this, but every year in this country, more than 300 children between the ages of infant and 12 are shot to death. They're shot to death. And to me, this is the most staggering statistic in all of the entire domain of quantitative data related to gun violence. I just, and I have an 8-year-old son, and I recognize he could be one of the victims. And I just, I look at these pictures all the time, and it's difficult. Sometimes it's depressing. But what I really wanted to do is to make me angry, and I want other people to be angry, and we should be, because nowadays policymakers know this. I mean, people know that because of our inaction, our collective inaction, in the face of this gun militancy, thousands of children are being shot to death. It's bad enough that they would die in a car accident or childhood leukemia or something else, but to be shot to death, I think, people, what they see on TV is nothing close to the reality.
That's right.
That. And then hundreds more are wounded and maimed for life. So I think this picture is very appropriate, and I'm going to keep it on my website and on my Facebook page, because I think it's something, people need to think about.
Well, there it is. Honest to God, that's who we are, folks. That's what we have become. That is, and we need to act. We need to do what we can. And we're late in the game. I mean, that's part of it. And I want to talk to Joe about that also. But let's bring this up on screen to kind of get to the basics here, the groundwork. I know everybody's seen a lot of this, and they've seen the videos, the closed circuit television feed from the school itself and all of that. I'm not going to show that, but this is out of the Independent. This is some recent reporting. The Nashville school shooting, the latest. Audrey Hale's post about partner's death revealed as motive is still unknown. Joe, last time I had you on, this was the subject that I brought up first and foremost. This supposed, I don't know what they're looking for here, some kind of justification. It's kind of like a self-defense motive or something in these Old West movies or whatever. What in the hell are they looking for here? What do they think the motive might be, and what difference does it make? This is, by your definition, this is one of those rampage killings, right?
It is. And I for many years taught a course on homicide, and back in the day when I was in criminal justice, I had occasion to be involved in a couple of homicide investigations. And so, when it comes to rampage killings of this nature, there's one common motive, and that's to kill as many people as possible. Now, in this case, it appears, and this is just speculation, but it appears, and this is common in rampage killings, is that probably what was going on with this person was that she was thinking about this for quite a while. She had stored up several guns. I think she had about 7 weapons. And these killers will fantasize about this, and they'll think about it, and then there'll be a precipitating event of some kind that'll put them into action. I don't know what it was in this instance. I read something that a close friend of hers had died, something of that nature. That might have been it. But what we have are people who are teetering on the brink of complete derangement, and they are able to easily and purposely and legally acquire as many firearms as they want. And then something happens. And that's why I always say to my students, when these things happen, the only thing we know for sure is it will happen again, because we have thousands of potential rampage killers in this country. Now, they don't all become rampage killers, but we have thousands. And we have 350 million available weapons, or there are at least millions of weapons that are on the market and easily accessible. That's a combination for a continuation of this type of tragedy. There's no way around it.
And we've got viewers joining us here to comment on this tragedy. And I like bringing these comments up on because this helps make the show go along a lot better. It's not always about me. It's about the guests, certainly, but also the viewers. And I want to bring these comments up, maybe have you talk about it. This is from Maple Mary Ann. She's a frequent viewer of podcasts by George Joe. She says Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine featured that Canada guns per capita were the same as the United States, but divisive fear-mongering messaging drove the KKK and the NRA to push cartoon U.S. history in Moore's movie. Now, I saw that movie, and it was many years ago. Does it still hold true, Joe?
Well, it holds true in this respect, that Canadians are able to possess guns. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. All right. What they're not able to do is just buy them without any kind of background check or confirmation. If they want a handgun or something like that, that they're responsible person who can handle, who can be trusted to be responsible, not go on killing rampages or shoot their family to death or that sort of thing. So that's the big difference. And it does bring up a point that I think is important to make. And I'm only speaking for myself here, but I'm not opposed to gun ownership at all. Okay. I was in the Army for 5 years. I was an expert on both my weapons, the M16 and the .45 caliber pistol. I've been a hunter. I've killed deer, bird hunting. And I understand that, there are a lot of people who enjoy hunting, bird hunting, and also just tinkering with guns. Okay. It's like people are, they restore automobiles, or they I do Lego. Okay. A lot of people have these kind of hobbies, and guns are a hobby for thousands of people. And most of those people are fine. The problem is that those same individuals will not stand with the rest of us to make it more difficult, not impossible, but more difficult for unstable, dangerous, extreme risk people to get guns. That's what they do in Canada, and that's what we should do here.
Yeah, and I'm with you, and I've said that before too, and I've owned guns before, and I can see where people might want them for self-defense, including myself, as crazy as the world is, although it's exaggerated and overstated, I think, by the fear-mongering media for ratings and all those types of things. But they can pull a truck up in front of my house with a smelter in it and melt down every gun that I've ever had, every gun that I will ever have, if it will save the life of that little girl that we saw in that montage of victims from Nashville. What I want, what I need, what's good for me even doesn't make a tinker's damn when it comes to this type of thing. I don't know what the hell people are thinking of about themselves and their rights and their guns when it comes to this. Try something. Try giving them up. Try turning them in. Try melting them down, because we can't do any worse than we're doing. God, it pisses me off to the maximum. Let me bring this up on screen, Joe, and continue here with these basics. Joe Biden attended a candlelight vigil in Nashville Wednesday night to honor the 3 children and 3 adults who were murdered at the Covenant School in the city. Meanwhile, Joe Biden has said that the White House is looking into his visiting the city in the wake of the latest U.S. school shooting. Joe, I am sick to death of politicians on so many fronts. They asked Joe if he was going to visit Nashville. He says, that's underway now, Mr. Biden said. We're trying to figure that out. Is he talking about scheduling? Is that what he's trying to? What the hell? I mean, how are we going to solve the gun crisis if Biden can't sort out his schedule? That's the way that I'm reading that thing. As Joe mentioned earlier, the shooting suspect, Audrey Hale, had previously posted on Facebook about the death of a romantic partner, according to a former teacher. Maybe this is the trigger that caused this thing. Art college instructor Maria Calamy, who taught Hale at the Nasi School of Art and Design in Nashville, recalled a social media post from the shooter openly grieving the unknown individual and said that Hale had announced the bereavement and asked to be addressed as Aiden and by masculine pronouns from then on. Okay, I highlighted this, Joe, because this is getting some play in the nutosphere, particularly. Marjorie Taylor Greene is blaming this thing on all the trans people, I think is the quote that she used. I talked to somebody last night, and the main thing that they wanted to talk about was this. Now, as a criminologist, looking at this situation, is this a significant issue? Is this a big part of this or not?
Well, if it was, we'd probably see it more often. I mean, I think it's absurd, and I think part of where this comes from is that these kind of horrors are so unimaginable that people grapple for some kind of a reason. They grapple for some kind of logic. Now, that's not the case with Marjorie Taylor Greene. She just steps into hate mode. Okay, but others will, they'll try to figure it out. What's going on here. And they'll look for something that recognizes, at least in their mind, as some other type of deviance, and then ascribe that as the cause of this. And I just, the only thing we can say for certain about people who undergo these kind, who engage in this kind of violence, is they are ill, psychologically ill. In this case, for instance, the parents didn't know she had so many weapons. They thought she had one weapon. She'd been under psychological care, I believe, and they actually tried to get the police to come out and take her guns, and they wouldn't do it because she owned them lawfully. So what we have here, it's like the person who gunned down the two police officers in Urbandale and West Des Moines. He had a long history of irrational behavior and mental health problems, and they couldn't take his guns away because he held onto them legally. And, that's the common denominator. It may be, that what we need to focus on instead of what happened in this individual case is the common denominator, which is someone is terribly unstable, a high risk, and people around the person, people in their orbit, especially their close friends, they know about it. The problem is there's nothing they can do about it. Now in some states, I think there are about 19 states where we have extreme risk protection orders. The Iowa legislature won't even look at such a thing. Okay, then extreme risk of protection orders is extremely important. It is the one way to reduce significantly these kind of tragedies.
Yep. We're going to get that. I want to bring that up on screen. I also want to tell people now for around the world what Joe was talking about, the situation in the west side of Des Moines several years ago. Now, there was a guy that was running amok out there, had been for some time. His family even had contacted authorities to do something with him. They knew that he had weapons. They knew he was a powder keg ready to explode. And eventually one night he did. He took a sniper rifle and set up in a position and killed police officers like somebody at a penny arcade at the state fair, for God's sake. A horrific circumstance that everybody knew about, including law enforcement, and couldn't do anything about because of the damnable laws. That's what Joe was talking about. Now, here we go again, Joe, to continue with this article here before we get to ERPO, as I've got it in the promo. An investigation continues into the shooter's possible motives for embarking on Monday's massacre at a private Christian elementary school in the Green Hills suburb of the Tennessee city. In addition to Peak, one of the victims, 3 children, age 9, Eveline Deckhouse, Hallie Scruggs, and William Kinney, we saw their pictures, shot to death Monday, as were staff members Catherine Kuntz and Mike Hill, the former since described as a hero. This is Catherine Kuntz for selflessly running towards the attacker to protect her charges. Police said the suspect, who was armed with 2 assault-style rifles and a handgun on Monday, was a former student at the school who had methodically planned the attack and may have harbored resentment against the institution. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here with these laws, the Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order, And I'm going to bring this up on screen a little bigger here so I can read it. It reads, extreme risk laws allow for temporary removal of guns from people in crisis. The Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act of 2021 was introduced in Congress in 2020. Okay, sponsored by gun violence survivor Representative Lucy McBath. Yeah, we've got a representative that is a gun violence survivor. I was not aware of this. This legislation allows family and household members, as well as law enforcement officials, to petition a federal court to temporarily remove firearms from a person who's at risk of harming themselves or others. I talked about Lucy there, Joe. I'm reminded of the fact that one of those most horrific shooting incidents on campus at Michigan State University, there were people on campus that also were prior victims of a rampage at a school. That's how prolific this stuff is getting. My God, can you imagine a repeat nightmare for people like that? And this Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act of 2021 gives people, an avenue to protect themselves. Now, it says 19 states and Washington, D.C. have enacted versions of extreme risk laws. Okay, Joe, you understand what's going on here with the legalities of this. If this was a federal legislation, did it not get through? 19 states are doing it on a state level, but it's not a federal law. Tell us about this.
Well, in order to have it become a federal law, it has to be passed by both houses in Congress and then signed by the president to become a law. And what that means is that since Democrats, if they ever are in a majority, are usually in a slim majority, they have to have Republicans to support. All right. I will say that at least in our United States Congress, in the Senate, we have a lot of Democrats who are very strong. They're as strong as horseradish on this bill. Unfortunately, we don't have that in Iowa, and we need it because this is a bill that's probably not going to become law until it passes at a state level. To say a couple of things about this policy, this bill. Because right now, anyone who's watching who is absolutely opposed to any kind of gun laws will see this and they'll buy into the gun militant narrative that this is just a gun grabber bill. Police will come and take my bill, my gun. It's the deep state. They're trying to stop us from fighting tyranny and everything. What this bill actually does. Are you still there, George?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. I lost my screen for a second. But what it does is, let's say you step out, let's say you're well known in your neighborhood for having a lot of guns, but you're also well known for being kind of a nut, right? But a harmless nut. But then suddenly you start going out on your lawn and howling at the moon at night and talking about how, the Martians are coming and everything like this.
Son of Sam was being told what to do by a dog in the neighborhood.
Like this guy in in Des Moines. I mean, when the police went out to any incident involving him, they were notified. In case the cop didn't know who he was, they were notified on their communications. Okay, this he had some sort of special designation as a high risk person. So every cop who ever interacted with him knew beforehand. Okay, that's not common. So what we could do with that kind of a person is we can file a request with the law. It depends on the state, with the court or with law enforcement. Then they have to go to court, but they'll go to the house and they'll say, okay, we have a court order here to seize these guns, and there's going to be a hearing, and you'll come in for the hearing and state your case, and you can have an attorney. All right, it's not a foregone conclusion. You can have an attorney. If you don't like the ruling, you can appeal the ruling. The person who believes this is a good idea to take the guns has to be able to state evidence as to why you are at risk for gun violence. So it's not a rubber stamp by any stretch of the imagination. And in the case of what happened in Nashville, the parents would have loved to have had the opportunity to take those guns or to temporarily seize them until she was well. Because that's what happens. You return about a year or 2 years later, the court returns and examines this case. Okay, is this person doing better now? Are they okay? And so it's not a permanent seizure. Now, if that had happened in Nashville, the pictures you had shown, all those people would be alive and in school today.
My God, just think about it. I want to bring this up. Another one of the comments or questions. This is from the great Mary Knox. She hates it when I call her the great Mary Knox. She's very, very modest. She says, is it a violation of privacy to ensure that gun purchasers are not receiving mental health treatment? So in other words, that's a doctor-patient privilege kind of thing. Is that an issue here, Joe?
Well, yeah. Well, let me say this, Mary. If you were in Germany or France or anywhere in Europe, you would have to be able to demonstrate on a formal record that you're not being treated for some kind of a dangerous, or some kind of a mental health problem that makes you at risk. Okay, and I believe that's true in Canada as well, by the way. But in the United States, no, there's no requirement for that whatsoever. Now, there would be a law that may prohibit a person who is mentally ill, who suffers from a serious mental illness, whatever that is, right? Because we don't, how do you define that, from owning a gun? But this young woman or young man, I apologize for that. I'm not sure where this person was in their transition, but walked into a gun store and bought these guns. And, she was deranged. She was completely mentally ill by all accounts. Right. So there has to be a way to get that name in the system so that a person under that kind of restriction walks into a gun store to buy a gun, she can't purchase it. But we are light years from that right now in the United States.
All right, let me bring this back up on screen here to read into this a little bit further. This description of the Extreme Risk Protection Order Act. And I'm going to have to change that because I can't even read it like that. That's pretty small, folks. What am I doing here? Let's bring this up. The Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act of 2021 would allow family and household members, as well as law enforcement officers, to obtain an extreme risk protection order from a federal court to temporarily remove access to firearms from someone who is deemed by the court to pose a risk to themselves or others. Now, this type of verbiage, this kind of wording reminds me a lot of domestic violence laws that are on the books already, that are effective, that work. And it's not a permanent circumstance, to your point earlier, Joe. I mean, if there's a volatile situation here, let's intercede temporarily. Have a cooling off period or something like that. There's a precedent for this, correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, absolutely. It is, to my mind, very analogous to domestic violence protection order. In fact, I've been thinking lately we should change the name of this to a gun violence protection order. I should say that also in the legislature, for instance, Art Stade has introduced this kind of bill in the House of Representatives in Iowa several times. Democrats don't line up behind it, doesn't get pushed effectively in the Public Safety Committee. People won't argue for it, doesn't get to a committee, doesn't get to the floor. So we've had political opportunities in the House to at least make this an issue that the public is aware about, that the voting public is aware of. Unfortunately, and I take no pleasure in saying this because I am a strong Democrat, the Democrats in the Iowa legislature do not make this a priority issue. They do not elevate it as a visible, important, significant matter for the safety and well-being of Iowans and our families. And people don't know this because it happens and then it goes off the radar. But first of all, we have several children who have been shot to death in Iowa, but we also have, I'm thinking right now, I think of 3 family annihilation murders. Okay. We had the family from Cedar Falls recently who went out to the park out in East Iowa and were shot to death. And we have these, but then, kind of like this thing in Nashville is going to do. We both know it. It's just going to fade away. People are going to lose their concerns about it. And then when the legislature comes along to try to pass a bill, the only thing the legislators are concerned about is how all those gun militants will bum rush them for hating the Second Amendment. And they don't want to take that heat. And so they won't stand up for a bill like an early risk protection order bill.
Well,
that's
and
the problem.
there's big bucks in play here too. I mean, there's a lot of money that's being funneled into these political coffers by groups like the NRA. I wanted to bring this up. I know that you're aware of this, again, from Maple Marianne. She says, what happened to the NRA edge of bankruptcy in 2020? We were all hoping maybe that this thing would collapse from within, maybe like an evil black hole or something like that. But they're still out there. They're still effective, Joe.
Well, they've always been morally bankrupt. And now they are financially bankrupt. And I think the thing with the NRA, I'm not a bankruptcy lawyer, and I don't follow the NRA's issues real closely in terms of their legal and financial affairs. But I think what's happening is that they're still negotiating around that in court. They're trying to, get their financial act together. But I do want to say something with Mary. Even if the NRA went, completely out of the picture today. This would not solve our problem because, as George mentions, this is big business, okay? This is big business by a major gun industry who profits in the billions. This is also big business for small businesses who are deeply committed to firearms, whether it's the gun stores or the people who provide training or sell equipment like holsters and things like this. I mean, people who have gun ranges, who set up gun shows, all this. This is big, big business, and it's unfortunately, it's not a business such as the alcohol industry. You know, when the alcohol industry sells alcohol, they say, you know, drink responsibly, be careful, right? Don't drink and drive. Now, they had to be sort of drugged to the table for that one, okay? That's what Mothers Against Drunk Driving did.
Yeah.
And people lined up behind that. The American public lined up behind that in ways they don't do around gun violence. And I'll just say the reason for that is because most of the victims of OWI fatalities are members of the white middle class. Most victims of gun violence are low income and minorities. What we see in these rampage killings is an anomaly. Okay, those victims are almost always white, middle class. That's not what happens with the 30,000, 35,000 gun deaths a year. Most are minorities and low income. So
let me bring this up on screen. It couldn't be more clearly illustrated than the National Gun Violence Memorial website that you often encourage people to visit, Joe. Here it is. And we're starting off right at the top here when I access this. Americans killed with gun, real people, not just statistics.
Real
and there's
people.
the beautiful people. But as you go through this, it's very easy to see what Joe is talking about. There's a lot of people of color in here. There are a lot of people that maybe don't even have photographs that they can show on here. But the majority of victims are people that don't get to the front of the bus in America in a lot of ways to this day, Joe. That's got to have something to do with this.
Well, what we see, I mean, I can just say this is from what I know about homicides, is that, first of all, most homicides originate as arguments between acquaintances. So let's say a couple of people on the streets and a couple of them are drunk, or they're in a bar and one, says something, the other says something, one's packing heat and they get shot. Yeah. And the other is domestic violence. So you saw a lot of women on that screen. And so many women are together with men who are aggressive and probably abusing alcohol or some other drug. They're unstable. They have a gun in the house. And so there we have it. Now, if you go back to that screen, George, and click on there's a place where you can click on that just shows the photograph of children, and you'll see the same pattern in terms of minorities. I don't know if you can find that, but so if you go to the top where it says search, up in the top left where it says search.
Yes.
Right there. Okay, now you can scroll down and we can see children to age 12.
Yes.
Right there. There we go. Now I look at this every so often whenever I'm up to it because I have, faced my own sort of emotional trauma with this. But I defy anyone to look at this page and just look at this. Look at these little babies. Look at these sweet little children. Think of your grandchildren, your children. Look at this is infant. He was shot to death. Okay. This little boy was shot to death. Okay.
The little boy in his police outfit there. Oh my God.
I mean, it is to me, and George, I say the same thing that you say. It's so unreal that it makes you feel like you're living in some kind of alternate universe. And we're doing it over and over and over. What the heck?
Yeah. What in the hell? That's what I say all the time on this show.
I'll say, I kind of go after the Democrats a little bit, but as I posted on Facebook today too, there are so many of my progressive friends who will, go on Facebook or be at a cocktail party or one thing or another, talk about gun violence is and rant about the NRA and everything like this. Yeah. But when I try to call them to put them on an email list, just so we can be in touch with them when we're doing something in the legislature. Oh no, Joe, I can't. Well, come to a meeting. No, I got this other thing I got to do. That's my knitting club that night, or that's my fantasy football league. That kind of thing. And that's actually kind of a big problem. It is. And the reason why I get it, as a sociologist, I understand. George, you are not directly affected by this. I've lost a friend to gun violence, and some people have, but most of us are not directly affected by it. We haven't lost a parent, a sibling, a child. But as you say, it's becoming more ubiquitous. There was even a newscaster the other day.
I saw that.
And she had been a survivor of gun violence.
And everybody was unaware of it. She just kind of like dropped that on the air live, like, what? Yeah.
She was trying to live through the trauma.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The PTSD with this for survivors is huge. You just can't imagine. Let me see. Bring this up. I want to continue because this is something that could work to a certain extent. These extreme risk laws allow petitioners to present evidence under oath to a court that an individual is a risk to themselves or others. The facts that are typically considered by the court would include patterns of recent threats and acts of violence to others or themselves, a history of violent behavior, dangerous past behavior with firearms, recent acts of cruelty to animals. Yeah, that's a bizarro psychological common denominator with a lot of this stuff. And of course, substance abuse. And of course, here in the heartland, not that many years ago, Joe, we used to pride ourselves in being a little forward thinking here in the state of Iowa, being a leader in kind of things that were right and correct and bright and all that type of thing. But we don't have this in Iowa, right?
Oh, as I said, when Archstead has put it into the hopper, if you will, in the state legislature, I think the last time he did it, he may have even had just one or two Democrats who signed on to it. I mean, it's, and I think Art, God bless him, I think that he's, feeling a little hopeless about it as well. I understand that, but no, this is, and it's not going to go anywhere until people care as much about this as they do legalizing marijuana. In fact, we have a legalizing marijuana bill that the Democrats put in, and every single Democrat is for it. And hey, I'm for it too. Okay. But that gets a lot of news media coverage. And that helps people to think about what maybe we should legalize that. They're looking at it in the legislature. They're serious about it.Maybe that's a good thing. But we won't do this with bills like the extreme risk protection order or ghost gun legislation, which was put in this year and had no traction whatsoever, none. And it's just, it's sort of a chicken and an egg thing in a way. The legislators are what they really want to see is they want to see more than just a handful of people. They want to see a lot of people down there doing stuff. Okay. Like when the Me Too movement happened, those hundreds of, people were down at the Capitol. They want to see that. But in order to get those hundreds of people, there has to be, the pump has to be primed. Okay. And the legislature can help do that. Democrats in the legislature can help do that by having press conferences on the bills and, engaging the right wing. I challenged two gun militant organizations in this state to debates, and neither one of them even got back with me on it.
Yeah.
Okay? One of them got back with me on it, but we're sort of supposedly we're going to sit down at time and talk, but that hasn't really been followed up on. So,
that offer reminds me of the Amazing Randy, that former magician that offered $1 million to anybody that could prove, one of these magic tricks as being real or, the occult and all that type of thing. I mean, the $1 million was sitting there, and he said, "Just come on and debate me. Just come on and let's have a conversation here." And now nobody wanted to take him up on that. I mean, it reminds me of the Amazing Randy. Let me bring this up on screen because, that's what Joe's talking about here with the political stuff. He's singing my song. We talk about this all the time. I'm criticized by my blue, no matter who friends, because I jump on the Democrats, but there's no point in trying to change the minds of people that don't have one, it appears to me like. And this was evidenced very clearly here just in the past day or two. Maybe people saw this. Now, this is the coverage out of the Common Dreams. Freaking cowards. Bowman confronts the GOP colleague face-to-face on gun violence. Republicans won't do shit when it comes to gun violence, but try to tell me to calm down, Representative Jamal Bowman wrote after a heated exchange with Republican Thomas Massey. And Jake Johnson, who writes for Common Dreams, I like his stuff. He says Democratic Representative Jamal Bowman vocally condemned his Republican colleagues in a hallway outside the House chamber on Wednesday, calling them freaking cowards and gutless for refusing to support basic control measures in the wake of the nation's latest mass shooting, the 130th of the year, Joe. I suppose you're well aware of that statistic, but I'm like, my God. Now, as Bowman railed against GOP obstructionism, saying that the Republicans won't do anything to save the lives of our children, Representative Thomas Massey, this nut from Kentucky, stopped to ask the New York Democrat, "What are you talking about?" Massey, who in 2021 posted a Christmas photo to which he and his family members are holding guns, proceeded to tout a dangerous NRA-backed proposal that Republicans float after virtually every school shooting in the U.S., arming teachers. God, this is something that kids that used to watch Roy Rogers back when I was a spud would propose. Let's give them all guns, including the bartender at the saloon, and just have them shoot it out or try to protect one another. My God, are we that dumb? A number of states already allow teachers to carry firearms under certain conditions. Here's a photo. This is a guy that is one of the most powerful people in the world because he's in the United States Congress, sitting there. Look at this. Who the hell would take a Christmas photo of something like that? Why is this necessary? What is this all about? I mean, okay, so let me bring this clip up and watch this. And, this is the dichotomy of America. This is us versus them. This is what in the hell? Here we go.
Freaking cowards. They're gutless. They're not here. I'm talking about gun violence. I'm talking about gun violence.
In a school that allows teachers to carry.
Carry guns? You think more guns lead to more death? More guns lead to more death. Look at the data. You're not looking at any data. You're carrying the water for the gun lobby.
No.
Look at the data. More guns lead to more deaths. States that have open carry laws have more deaths.
In every school
States that have open carry laws have more deaths.
There's never been a shooting.
Are you listening to what I'm saying?
Yeah, calm down.
Calm down. Children are dying.
I know, I've got
9-year-old children. The solution is not arming teachers. Have you ever worked in a school? 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 It's a yes or no question. Have you ever worked in a school? You will not answer my question. Don't stop and talk to me. Okay, I'll bring it down a notch. Have you ever worked in a school?
I've got a bill to repeal.
I worked in the school for 20 years. I was a team. I was speaking before you came and interrupted me.
Well, there you go. I mean, I like that clip just to see Jamal Bowman calling out one person trying to, the guy speaking to the media there, and this Thomas Massey guy interjects himself into this conversation. That Jamal Bowman reminds me, just to hear his voice, I have a good friend, rest in peace, my buddy Joe. That's what Joe would have been saying. That's what he would have sounded like. That's, and even the timbre of his voice, the way that he sounds. And that Thomas Massey guy, Joe, I don't recognize that. I mean, I talked to, about that Christmas photo and all that kind of stuff. I don't know who these people are.
That's because they're militants.
Yeah.
That's because they're militants. They're like the jihadists who do not represent Islam. Okay. That's who they are. Let me mention a couple of things because I've seen this tape too. One of the things I would say is that kind of keeps people sort of out of the gun violence movement is they watch a clip like that. Most people don't want to get into arguments. Okay. They don't like tension. And so, they see that and they say, I don't want to be part of that. Right. Now that's not always the case because you notice the pro-life movement. Oh man, they were fine with tension. Okay. Progressives, less so. Okay. To a large extent, but I admire Congressman Bowman for his outrage and his going straight to part of the source of the problem. I will say that Congressman Massey, I wish he would debate me because he would not pull that stuff about how many schools where there have been armed teachers have had, I mean, that's just, it's just
It's
kind
a
of
red herring, and statistically, it's like saying schools that served pepperoni pizza.
That's
I mean,
right.
they're not
That's
related. They're not
exactly right.
connected.
They're not related whatsoever. I'll tell you another thing though that jumps out at me about that picture though. Now that scene, I don't know if you noticed it. So here was Congressman Bowman expressing his appropriate and righteous condemnation of where we are in America with gun laws, and who was trying to pull him back? Did you see that?
Yeah, that
It
old
was
guy.
Stenholm.
Oh yeah,
It was Stenholm, the majority leader or the
yeah,
minority leader. So it was the Democratic Party establishment
yeah. Like you're getting out of
trying to
line. You're
pull
over the
back.
top here. Yeah,
Yeah, he's trying to pull him back, and that's kind of the problem. And I know I'm all my friends in the legislature, Democratic friends in the legislature who see this, they just and it's hard to do what he does because I posted a quote by Susan B. Anthony today. When you're on the front lines of this kind of stuff, an unpopular issue,
Freaking cowards. They're gutless. They're not here. I'm talking about gun violence.
Never been.
I'm talking about gun violence.
when you
yeah.
play the clip a little farther, you see it. But it's hard work. I mean, you get me a little stirred up, George. So, but I'm not looking to have antagonistic, confrontation of that type. I would like to have rational debate. I would like to sit down with the leaders of the gun violence organizations and see where we can find common ground. Because as I say, I'm not opposed to gun ownership. I'm opposed to living under an arrangement where so many deranged people in a country, by the way, that is very weak in its mental health, providing mental health to people, have tens of thousands of people who are just dangerous because of their mental health. Not all people who are mentally ill are dangerous, but there are a lot of dangerous people who are mentally ill, or there are too many, let me say it this way. And then they have easy access to guns. And they can purchase them legally. They can't be stopped, in most states. And, but I think we can have discussions about this. But they're not easy discussions. They're not easy discussions. And the place where I'm going to have the most kind of problem that's going to come up, and people who are take my position and want to get serious about it in the legislature right now, frankly, is with Democrats. They just,
that's what I tell people all the time. The Republican Party has jumped off the political platform, the right side of it. I mean, they got on a crazy train and they've gone over the horizon, folks. I mean, chasing after those folks, there's no point in that. If we're going to get any relief from this, it's going to come from the Democrats, and they're the people that you got to lean on. And like I said on my last show, Joe, when they call you for money, which they do for me all the time, particularly if you've thrown some money their way in the past, tell them not another dime unless I am sick to death of this. And I think of my money not being used in this manner. I mean, that's a big part of it. Let me bring this up on screen because I want to get to this here because people, when it comes to these extreme risk laws, you may hear this kind of stuff. And Joe, you can jump in here any point you want to. Extreme risk laws are not a permanent prohibition on gun or ammunition ownership or purchase. Yeah, that's true, but that's actually something that may get something like this passed. Because it's not permanent. It is something it's a pause. It's a stop. It's extreme risk laws do not create a new avenue for criminality. All proceedings take place in a civil court. Extreme risk laws are not a substitute for domestic violence restraining or protection orders. Yeah, don't confuse the two here, folks. Extreme risk laws are not based off of an individual's mental health diagnosis and are instead created to identify indicators of risk and potential violence. And finally, extreme risk laws do not remove due process protections. Joe talked about this. They allow an individual to be notified and present evidence in their defense before a court. So you're not going to get a knock on the door from some gendarme in the middle of the night that's going to haul you and your gun off, and you're never going to get a day in court. You get one, and your protections under the law are the same as non-gun owners. Correct, Joe?
Oh, yeah. There are robust protections here for due process. The gun militant crowd, their strategy, and it's an effective one, is to just say that anything that could prohibit anybody from having any kind of gun, we're going to oppose it. And we're going to oppose it on the basis of the Second Amendment gives me the freedom to have it, but it doesn't give the absolute freedom. We're going to oppose it on the basis of, there's a terrible risk that the government will start by becoming a tyrannical government. And I'm going to use this arsenal of weapons that I have in my home to protect democracy. There are all kinds of things. I will tell you, frankly, even the self-defense claim, if someone can legally use a weapon for self-defense, a firearm, well, then do it. But, it's such a rare occasion when that happens. But that's okay. I mean, it shouldn't remove from people's frame the notion that we can keep guns away from people who are extreme risk.
Yeah, don't let I call it gypsy dust that they throw up in the air. I've talked about that before. I'm not going to don't let that confuse you folks, because this is what it is, Joe. That's what a lot of that stuff is. This is Shinola. Anybody that knows that saying knows exactly what I'm talking about. These people
that's what it is. That's what it is.
They're spreading around the Shinola. Well, we're just about running out of time here. And like I said, I think I'm going to end the same way that I started here. I want to show these victims. And Joe, I want you to do a wrap here for us. Just kind of talk over these photos here as we wrap up this edition of Podcast by George.
Well, George, recently a couple of times I've spoken to a friend of mine who's a police chief, and every so often I'll say, well, did you hear about this killing? Did you hear about this rampage? And his response is, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And that type of message of defeatism and learned helplessness is costing children their lives. It's costing women who are trapped with abusive men their lives. It's trapping, innocent citizens who are out just doing their business, just taking care of their business, their lives, but especially these darling children. At the very least, we should be able to step up and say, you know what, there must be something we can do. And there is. Early risk protection orders, universal background checks, so many things that we can do. Now, is it going to stop all gun violence? No. We can't stop all traffic accidents. We can't stop all cancer deaths. We can't remove the totality of risk from any type of behavior. But will it save lives, such as this dedicated educator? Yes, it might. It could. It would have saved her life. Early risk protection order would have saved her life, probably, because the parents of this maniac would have gotten one, probably, because they knew their daughter had these problems. So we just have to impose some rationality on this and not buy into the gypsy dust. Yeah. And George, I just want to thank you so much for.
Don't buy into the Shinola. Yeah.
Yeah, or the Shinola. That's right. But, George, people like you also need to, and I know how hard it is, but it's really important what you're doing. And we need more people in the media to be committed to it. That would help enormously. The media has also kind of dropped the ball on this issue, to be honest with you. They have a narrative, like there was a hero. Oh, there was an assault rifle. That sort of thing. They have a narrative and they play that narrative out, and they don't really dig down deeper, with some exceptions. The Washington Post does a great job. So, but thank you again, George.
Yeah, the great Murray Knox again. Well, I should have loved one. I have to go through all of that to prevent a person from self-harm or to harm others. And I was
because of the Second Amendment, Mary. The Second Amendment is out there, and it is the law of the land. I don't have to be in favor of it. You don't have to be in favor of it. But it's the law of the land, and that's the reason why.
Yeah, and to Joe's point here, I'll just close with this. A lot of these, they will not show the really graphic, the really bad stuff. They will not show even the directory there. Like I said, a quick scan to that website that Joe likes so well that we put on screen every time that he comes on. We got to do this. And think of that running girl. And I could put her image up too, but I know people remember that. I know Joe does. From the Vietnam War, running from that village that had been napalmed. She was naked and burning alive, for God's sakes. Fortunately, she survived, by the way. I think she just had a birthday that was in the news.
Or the Buddhist monk who immolated himself.
Yes.
And, those type of images.
Got to show them.
I mean,
if you're going to have change, you got to understand what this is like. Because to Joe's point, most people have not been touched directly by this. They haven't seen it. Most people haven't even seen somebody killed, in any
That's right.
circumstance. And I, as a reporter, I have, as I mentioned
Yep.
at the top. And once you see those types of things, you become, you understand humanity and the value of life and how horribly, horribly it is taken away. These are not nice deaths, folks. This is not dying in your sleep peacefully like we all hope
It's-
to someday at a grand old age. These are little bitty babies, 9 years old, for God's sake, blown apart by bullets that spin in the air like rotating pop cans and tear them apart from these assault weapons, which shouldn't be purchased by any civilian, that are to be used only in a civilian in a theater of war. Get rid of them there, as far as I'm concerned. But let's get rid of them here in the civilian population and do
Absolutely.
something about this. And Joe, good on you, man. Keep that offer
you,
out
sir.
there. Keep
going
fighting
to.
a good fight. Yeah.
I'm going to. They're not going to beat me down.
All right,
We'll
folks.
stay after it. Thank you, George.
Yeah, we'll get back together here again. I know we will. Like I said, I
We
wish
can
I'd
have
never.
hey, sometime if you want to, we can have one just to talk about assault rifles.
Yeah.
Just to talk, because there's a lot of confusion, but I'd be happy to come back and just we can focus in on that issue.
All right, that'll be great, folks. But we're
All
out
right,
of time for this Lifeline. We'll talk again soon, Joe. That's Joe Gorton. He's a professor emeritus of criminology at the University of Northern Iowa. He's worked his entire adult life to stop this national disgrace, the shame of gun violence in America. And as he mentioned, he's got a standing offer out there, folks. He'll debate anybody on the issue that he spent most of his life working on. Taking him up on it. If you're watching this and you think, I don't agree with Joe, take him up on it. And folks, that's going to do it. We're going to leave it there. And I want to encourage everybody, like I do at the end of every show, to go to podcastbygeorge.com and check us out there. You can subscribe, sign up on Facebook or YouTube very easily. It's easier than going to the platforms. Actually, you just click on the icon, the badge, take you right to where you need to be to like us, follow us, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, leave us a comment on Facebook, ring that notification bell on YouTube. That's where the live streams are seen in video, and then the recorded videos are also available into perpetuity. And of course, if you just like the audio, and I'm an old radio guy, so I get that. I mean, I like to listen to shows on my phone when I'm out riding my bike outside, that type of thing. Go to podcastbygeorge.com and click on the iTunes icon or Spotify or Deezer or whatever you use. You'll find Podcast by George there. But that's going to do it, folks. That's going to wrap it up on another tragic week in America. My God Almighty. That's another podcast by George.